Hello and welcome. Today you'll be hearing about the SNAP and employment and training programs. My name is Joanna Wright. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Self-Sufficiency Program's Tribal Liaison. I'll hand it off to the presenter, Sarah Cleaver.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. My name is Sarah Cleaver. I'm one of the SNAP Employment and Training Policy Analysts with the Oregon Department of Human Services. I use she, her pronouns, and I am just so excited to continue our learning and our consultation with you all today. So thank you, tribal leaders, for joining or for watching the recorded session at a later time. I really appreciate your time and attention while I'm sharing information about the SNAP employment and training programs. You'll hear me say SNAP E&T quite a bit. And I am requesting a consultation on the SNAP E&T provider proposal. So during this presentation, I will do a high-level overview of the SNAP E&T program, and then I'll dive into key pieces in the proposal budget template. Today, I'm specifically requesting feedback on the proposal budget, which does directly inform our SNAP E&T state plan. So to start with, I'm going to do an overview of our SNAP E&T programs. So the Oregon Department of Human Services Employment and Training Programs, or SNAP E&T, they work to develop resources and really provide individuals the opportunities and access to education and training and employment services, which then in turn offer a pathway towards economic stability. The SNAP E&T programs have a number of goals that really kind of drive the focus and the direction of the program. So first off, of course, is to offer employment, training, and education services to all eligible individuals across the state. We also have a goal to ensure equitable access to all of those services and to offer those services to any underserved populations. We strive to provide a continuum of services for families who might have been engaging with TANF and those services, transitioning into SNAP. So collaborating with SNAP E&T programming for continued access. So no interruption in those goals and working towards those. And finally, really the ultimate is developing those resources for both individuals and families to have a safety net, to have some stabilization and provide that pathway out of poverty. Now, if you've watched the other session, you might recall that the SNAP E&T program offers employment and training services across the state and is made up of two different programs. So one is STEP, that is the SNAP Training and Employment Program, because we love acronyms. And the other one is ABOD, Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents. And that is specific for individuals who are subject to some benefit time limits. The focus of both of these SNAP E&T programs is to assist folks in improving the skills that really lead to some career development and financial independence. Oregon is committed to equity in both of the SNAP E&T programs through service delivery, engagement, collaboration, and strategic goal setting. Now, today's discussion is going to focus only on STEP, but if you have questions about ABOD, please let me know. Talk a little bit about the timeframes here because they are federally set and they're pretty strict. So every year, all STEP providers, all of our contracted service delivery providers have to apply or reapply to be a contracted service provider for the upcoming federal fiscal year. Federal fiscal years run from October 1st through September 30th. Myself, as part of the SNAP E&T team, we issue the provider proposal at the end of every January, and that includes the written proposal narrative, like a Word document, as well as a proposal budget, which is what we're talking about today. The proposal is sent out to potential providers as part of the monthly steering committee meeting that we have. Takes place on the last Wednesday morning of every single month. Now, that provider proposal has to be submitted by those potential providers back to the SNAP E&T policy team by April 15th. That means providers have to plan in the very early spring how their STEP program is going to look and operate in the upcoming federal fiscal year, which starts in October. Now, those final proposals and all those budgets are rolled up together and submitted by ODHS to our federal partners for final approval in the Oregon SNAP E&T state plan. All those executed contracts have to be in place in September, so providers can implement their STEP programs starting October 1st. Quick time frame, it's a really tight turnaround, and I just wanted to highlight that everything's constantly moving and changing and always future planning. Now, in this year, federal fiscal year 2025, Oregon currently has 53 STEP providers. So think local community organizations, other government agencies, all of Oregon's community colleges are STEP providers, and one four-year university, Portland State University. Each of these providers offers a different array of services to support folks in reaching their career goals. So that could look like educational services or maybe job searching support, or maybe offering supportive items like transportation or work clothing, things of that nature to help folks reach those goals. Each provider gets to determine the specific services that they're offering and the specific supports that they will offer based on their own goals, their agency staffing and their budget, making sure that that all aligns with the state and federal requirements. Now, there's a ton more information talking about Oregon's STEP program in the presentation that took place in December. If you're interested in learning more about STEP or providing feedback on that proposal narrative, please view that recorded session, reach out to me anytime. My email and the team email is on the last side of both of the presentations. So today we are inviting tribal leaders to formally consult by reviewing and providing feedback on the STEP provider proposal budget. So that impacts service delivery as well as the annual SNAP E&T state plan. Since these proposals are so large, the narrative and the budget, they contain just a bunch of information. So we developed two presentations to break things apart a little bit and cover all the materials. So today's focus is the budget. The budget is developed and revised every year to help align with any new federal requirements, and like I mentioned, is distributed in January. The document asks providers to outline those specific costs related to their STEP program as they outlined in their proposal narrative. So as a reminder, providers do operate in all areas of the state, and participants may be tribal members or may reside on tribal lands. So this proposal information about all those services available to everyone in Oregon, it's collected from all the providers and, like I mentioned, rolled up into that state plan. That state plan is also a federal requirement, and it informs our federal partners on the programming for SNAP E&T services available in Oregon, and also provides some justification for that federal funding. So tribal leaders, you are invited to review the proposal budget, provide feedback and suggestions on the questions that providers must answer, and the budget details that they have to provide. Tribal leader input is really vital to ensure SNAP E&T programming is accessible, that it's relevant, and that it supports individual tribes' needs. So I'm going to jump in. We're going to get into all the details here just on really a handful of key pieces of the STEP proposal budget. I'm going to be highlighting the current draft as we're still working to make adjustments and implement any feedback or suggested changes. So as we're walking through these key pieces, I'm inviting feedback on any items you suggest be phrased or asked differently, maybe items that we should add to ensure the services are meeting the needs of tribes in Oregon, and answer any questions you might have. Definitely welcome any feedback or suggestions to help guide the development of this iteration of the proposal budget. So the budget itself is an Excel document. It contains 9 different tabs. Told you it's big. Really trying to solicit the details regarding that potential providers' proposed STEP costs and other required information. Now, I'm only highlighting 5 sections today, but please note our team is soliciting and welcoming feedback on the entire budget. So I just Wanted to let you know we accept feedback on all of it, but I'm only going to cover just a handful of sections here today. So on each tab, or yeah, on each tab of the budget template, there is information for providers to enter. There's sections that are gray. Those are informational or maybe formula fields, and providers are asked not to alter or edit them in any way. There are also sections in light green, or when no examples are present, like you see on the screen, they would just be blank. Those are the fields in which providers are expected to enter their organization's information. Again, we update that budget template every year based on feedback received to streamline the process, to make it easier to understand, and really have clear information so the providers know what is expected of them. So the first tab that I'm going to highlight is called the Program tab. So on the Program tab, information that's requested includes any costs for STEP staff. That would include their salary and benefits, costs for STEP goods and services, which I'll talk about on the next slide, and costs for STEP staff travel and training, as well as an indirect cost calculation. So lots of information on each one of those 9 tabs. Right now, I'm displaying the STEP salary and benefits section on the Program tab. So the information that we get on this section includes how many positions are funded with STEP dollars, each one of those employees' total annual salary, and then the percentage in which each staff is dedicating their time to STEP programming, and then taking into account percentage of fringe benefits. The information then, there's a formula you can see in the gray fields. It calculates the total annual cost of just that STEP portion of that position, and then the contracted amount. That is a 50% reimbursement rate. The information is super helpful by requesting providers to list out all of the positions that are funded by STEP. The SNAP E&T team can better understand the number of staff involved in the STEP providers program. Having the positions by title really gives a perspective on those staff persons' roles in their agency. So as you can see here, for an example, we might see an executive director, a STEP case manager, and a fiscal analyst included. We specifically chose not to request individual staff persons' names to prevent any duplicate work throughout the year. If we did use names instead of titles, then anytime that position was vacated and rehired, that provider would need to submit an updated budget. So using titles allows for flexibility and honestly reduced paperwork. Breaking out the overall program costs into these different sections, like salary and benefits, also allows for a better ease in state budget tracking. Our team uses these budget templates, once we review and approve them, to build each provider's specially tailored invoice. Really helps to track those specific costs. So we'll dive in a little bit more into another section of the Program tab, which outlines some other program costs. So here you can see this is the goods and services section. Here, providers are itemizing any office or program related cost for their proposed STEP programs. This section allows for items like office supplies, postage, purchase services. Maybe they have a tech person on staff, maybe they have some sort of consultant, or space rent. You can see these examples have been filled in just to better visualize how providers might enter their information. Now, just like in that salary and benefits section that I just covered, breaking out the overall program costs into different sections like office supplies and postage also allows for ease in invoicing and budget tracking. Again, we're using the budget templates once they're approved to build that specially tailored invoice with these specific line items. So the categories that you see here on goods and services, those are the ones most often used by providers. We do have a section for other costs if there's things that just don't quite fit. The team has really condensed this list over the years, trying to remove any unused or very rarely used line items to just reduce the size of the document. However, keeping these primary categories still ensures that the team fully understands the provider's proposed budget, how that STEP funding is going to be used, and then the team can ensure that any of those costs that are being charged to STEP funding are federally allowable and reimbursable. So while all the dollar amounts are outlined on here on this program tab, we also require providers to really speak to their calculations and explain exactly how they arrived at the reported cost per item in another tab. I'll talk about it later. It's the budget justification tab. So in addition to the salary and benefits that we just covered, any goods and services, providers are also entering information on the program tab that speaks to their STEP staff training, travel costs, and their indirect costs. Collecting all of this information together on one tab really helps to meet the federal requirements for that SNAP E&T state plan. Pardon me, the state plan format, it separates the costs by kind of breaks it down by program and administration. And then there's another section for support service costs. And then there's a third one for state costs. So having these broken apart in the proposal budget helps to streamline and really make sure that we're counting the right categories. If tribal leaders do have suggestions on how to better or more concisely gather this information, definitely open to suggestions. Always willing to make adjustments on these. So now that we've talked a little bit about those program and administration costs, I'm going to explore the support services tab. So support services are items that are offered to STEP participants, either to assist or support them in meeting their goals and completing any activities that they set forth in their case plan. All STEP providers must offer some support services to address needs or reduce barriers and really help participants progress in their career journeys. So providers can choose to utilize STEP funding to offer support services, or they can choose to utilize other funding sources. Either way, support services are a required program element. For those providers who do choose to use STEP funding, they must outline those costs in the proposal budget in this support services tab. So this tab is divided into specific service categories, such as the one shown. The category containing books, training materials, supplies, and software includes items like textbooks and paper, personal organizers, maybe training manuals, just to name a few. There are 14 different categories of support services on this tab. Again, very robust document. I think it's around 100 or 115 rows all the way down on this specific tab. And so for each one of those categories, providers are asked how many unduplicated or unique individuals will be receiving that category of supports every year, the average number of folks who are going to receive that every month, and their estimated total cost for the year for that support item. These numbers are used not only to calculate the yearly total and the 50% reimbursement amount for contracts, but again, as I mentioned, also inform the state plan. The state plan does require a total estimated budget for support services for all contracted partners, as well as a unique number or unduplicated number of individuals expected to receive the support services for the year, and how many folks are going to receive supports every month. So by outlining these costs by each category and therefore preparing that invoice individualized in the same manner, the SNAP E&T team is also accurately tracking spending in those specific support categories. This really allows for the opportunity to analyze that spending, reflecting upon the categories with the largest end of year spending. For example, in 2024, I can tell you transportation was the biggest, followed very closely by tuition, and right behind that was clothing and tools for work or training. So by having all of those outlined and knowing where most providers are spending money, It's helping the SNAP E&T team have conversations with providers about maybe increasing support service budgets in those high needs categories to better support the needs of their local communities. So the next tab in the budget document is called the Component Breakout tab. Little play on words here, the services that we offer through the SNAP E&T program. They are called services, they are called service components, or they're called components. We mean the same thing when we're using different words. It's kind of translating the federal speak into state speak into what real people say. So this is called the component breakout tab because it's kind of specific to the federal requirements. The primary purpose of this tab is to estimate the total program costs. We're kind of back to those program and administration costs for each specific service that provider is choosing to offer. Also breaking it apart, the number of participants in those services and the total participants across all services for that organization's STEP program for the year. A lot of details here. All of this information is required for the state plan. We have to report the projected annual number of participants for each service, like supervised job search or job search training. You can see those little tiny columns on the slide, as well as the estimated program and administration costs for each of those components. So we're thinking for the staff salary, for any goods and services, for any training needed for the staff to offer these, all of that is rolled up onto this tab. A new feature on the fiscal year 26 proposal that you see here is a question that's on the bottom left of this slide. I know it's pretty small, but it does ask what percentage of all individuals served by your organization are anticipated to be STEP enrolled participants. This question is really meant to elicit a percentage describing that organization's STEP program participants versus everyone else that they're serving in that organization. It really helps to better inform conversations as the SNAP E&T team is reviewing the proposal and seeking to understand how costs are outlined on that program tab and following up in the budget justification tab. So it just bringing everything together and getting more information to really inform services, delivery, and justification of said costs. Speaking of justification, the final tab that I'm going to review in detail is the budget justification tab. Now, this one has gone through many different iterations over the years, but the intent always remains the same. Here, providers are specifically asked to speak to their costs, how they were calculated, what those costs include, details about how those items are going to be used for STEP. Think of it just like the math teachers in high school used to say, you have to show your work, right? So for example, say a provider entered $500 for office supplies on the program tab. Here on this budget justification tab, they're going to provide information about the specific supplies. Maybe they have costs for in-house copying and printing, notebooks for the staff, pens and pencils, calendars, signage, maybe posters to showcase their STEP program. All of that would fit into office supplies. So then the provider would show how those expenses are directly related to STEP. They would talk through that on this tab. Or maybe they tell us that it's a cost allocation based on the number of full-time employees and a percentage of STEP participants, as outlined in those program tab and component tab. So it really helps elicit all of that information. So it also helps the SNAP E&T team to better understand and either request additional information or just approve the line items. It helps the SNAP E&T team speak to the spending that is being allocated and really justify any questions from our organization leadership about spending and our federal partners. Now, like I mentioned, the tab has morphed and changed and continues to kind of morph and change through the years. again, we are requesting feedback on how to better obtain this information. If you have suggestions or ideas on how to structure this tab, maybe different questions to ask, phrasing, please let us know. We're very, very open to feedback. Now, there are several other tabs on the budget template that I'm not going to discuss in heavy detail today. So that's total costs, funding sources, agency contacts, subcontractors, and subsidized employment. Now, not minimizing because each of these tabs are vital to understand the full scope of a STEP provider's budget. But in the interest of time and information overload, I'm only focusing on those mentioned. However, do want to highlight just one additional important feature of the budget template, and this is on the funding sources tab. So STEP providers have to have sufficient funding in place to cover those upfront costs of their STEP program expenses. This is a reimbursement program, so providers have to be able to field those costs, kind of hang on to those with their own funding sources until that quarterly billing comes around and we can reimburse them. So while they're outlining their total costs, we're most concerned with that contracted cost or the 50% reimbursement and making sure providers have sufficient funding to cover these. We call those match funds. Match funds cannot be from a federal source. Easy to remember, organizations can't match federal funds with federal funds, right? Reimbursements are federal funds. So what we most often see match funds are from local school districts, maybe city grants, fundraising, donation, that kind of thing. Just want to highlight that all of our current community-based organizations, government agencies, community colleges, and four-year university who are contracted partners do receive a 50% reimbursement on those STEP costs. However, if a tribe chooses to become a contracted STEP provider, very welcome to talk with me more about that. Tribes receive a 75% reimbursement of STEP costs. So it's an additional reimbursement for tribes. Definitely welcome any questions about tribes who are interested in joining the STEP provider network. But please also let me know if you have any questions about the STEP program in general, if you have feedback regarding the budget template, or if you just want to talk a little bit more about STEP services. So thank you all again. I know this was a ton of information. I really, really appreciate your time and attention. And we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas and suggestions on both the proposal narrative and the proposal budget. You can contact me at my email address or at the SNAP E&T email address, both shown on this slide and, like I mentioned, the final slide of the proposal narrative presentation. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to receiving your feedback.